Hello there, Kathy Wilson here. I want to talk for a few minutes about this question that people who have experienced a scam, that a question that they often ask themselves very soon, if not immediately, after realizing that what has just happened has been a scam. That question is, how could I be so stupid? And it comes in a different couple of different forms, right? How could I be so dumb? How could I fall for that? There's many forms of that same kind of question that is essentially blaming yourself. And a big part of where this comes from is victim blaming in our society in general about this type of crime. The victim blaming itself leads to stigma and shame, and that's part of the stigma, the shame, especially the shame, is part of what you're feeling so horrible from. And so, stepping back before victim blaming, a psychological factor that is behind that is what's called the fundamental attribution error. It's sometimes referred to as attribution bias. But essentially, what that thinking style or pattern or error means is that if something happens to me and it's bad, then I'm going to look for outside factors outside of me that caused that. And it's kind of a natural place that our brain goes. Now, when that happens to someone else, it's the opposite. I'm going to look for, why did that happen to you? Is there something about you that made that happen? And that's the conclusion that people often draw. They want it to be about the person it happened to, because there's some false sense of security built into that that means, oh, okay, it can't happen to me. That person made a mistake. They were in the wrong place. They didn't see what was really happening. They're dumb. Right? A lot of times that is people's conclusion, is that that happened to that person because they're dumb. And what grows from this attribution error in our thinking is stigma, victim blaming. That is victim blaming in and of itself. And so then the next step that happens with that is that it's evident in subtle ways and sometimes not so subtle, but there are many, many subtle ways that this is shown or displayed, or it manifests itself. So, for instance, a headline can read one way to blame the victim. It can read another way to focus on the criminal themselves. So if you take an example, for instance, a man is at the grocery store, middle of the day, walks out to his car, and someone robs him. They have a gun, they take his wallet and whatever else he may have, maybe something he just purchased. And they rob him, right? No one asks a person with that type of crime, what were you doing there? Well, why were you there at that time? And they don't ask those questions. The blame is squarely on the criminal in that instance. But that doesn't happen with scams. Instead, we focus on the person it happened to. Well, how could you have prevented this? And they look for a reason that it could have been prevented if you had just been able to see that this was a scam. Why did you just give them your money? Of course you shouldn't do that. But that isn't how a scam works. The scammer might not have a gun or another kind of weapon, but what they're using as weapons is lies, manipulation tactics. They are using the way our brains work against us. They're using our values against us. And so those are their weapons that they use in order to steal from a person. It's important to remember all of this piece, because the subtleties in headlines and the way people talk, we've absorbed that our entire lives, right? And So we have this belief that the person caused it themselves. And so then when it happens to you, you of course have internalized that concept. You've internalized the victim blaming related to scams, and you're turning it on yourself at that point. And so I wanted to go into detail to some extent on this and show the succession of ways that this comes about to help you understand why you're blaming yourself too. Not only are you hearing it from others and it hurts, you're blaming yourself and that hurts too, of course. And so now that you're aware of this and the couple of factors that go into play in this situation that leave you blaming yourself, and a big part of that is internalizing those beliefs about scam victims. Now that you know this, you can challenge it. You can remind yourself, that person lied to me. They presented a situation and it wasn't like that at all. Or they heightened my emotions in some way, either through romancing you or creating what you think is a crisis situation with someone you love. They create a lot of emotion in you, and that impairs your ability to see things differently. And so the impairment doesn't mean that that's your fault. The impairment is something they did to you on purpose to make it easier for them, to disarm you, to take advantage of you. It's still a crime. It is still stealing. Those tactics that they use are still weapons. And so using these ideas, use them to challenge this idea within yourself. That's also going to strengthen your ability to challenge it when you hear it from another person. Because unfortunately, you probably have already heard that from someone else, whether it's law enforcement or a family member or someone else that you've interacted with or had to tell them that this happened. So overall, what I'd like to encourage you to do is to be kind to yourself, to challenge this and help yourself to feel better, to remember that it isn't your fault that this happened, that you are a crime victim, and to go ahead and seek help anyway, because we all need a lot of support when this has happened. So all my very best to you. Take care.